some of these missions we've been seeing here on our screen? What do you know?
Hi, Christina. Yes, that's right. We can now confirm, according to 3 U.S. officials, that the U.S. has been helping in shooting down these Iranian missiles and projectiles that have been targeting Israel today. Now, that's notable for a couple of reasons. We know that in the past, this is something that the U.S. has done. For instance, the Biden administration had a similar posture back when this was taking place in October. But today, and given the events of the last 24 hours, we can report, according to my colleagues who cover the Pentagon, that specifically military assets in the region were moved. And I can tell you specifically some Navy destroyers had been positioned off the Israeli coast to help shoot down some of these missiles and other aerial attacks that are expected, given what we saw last night in the initial attack. And what's notable about that, again, is that this is something where the U.S. possesses the technology that's critical in helping Israel, which of course has its own very sophisticated modern aerial defense systems with the Iron Dome and with all of the experience it has, but where it's often a case you see that the U.S. would aid Israel in its defense because of the hundreds of thousands of Americans who live in Israel, and in addition to the military assets that are positioned in and around Israel that the U.S., of course, would have an interest in defending. So that is a new development, and I'm here at the White House where President Trump still hasn't added anything to his public schedule. He had a national security meeting with his top aides in the Situation Room earlier today, which I'm told was fairly lengthy and ongoing as they were monitoring all of this. I can also tell you, Christina, that the president today has spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We know that they had spoken earlier in the week as well, but as we are trying to navigate all these questions of what the U.S. knew in advance of Israel's attack on Iran yesterday and what role it has played today and what role it will continue to play, that's a pretty key conversation. And it sounds like there are other world leader calls that have taken place, with Downing Street saying that the president spoke with the British Prime Minister, and there are reports of other calls. So we'll bring you more details as we have it, but significant again to update our viewers that U.S. officials do tell us that the U.S. is playing a role in helping Israel defend itself against these retaliatory attacks from Iran. Christina.
Monica, thank you so much. We also have some new reporting in from our producer in Tel Aviv. The IDF spokesperson says both barrages of missiles, there were less than 100 missiles fired at Tel Aviv from Iran. I want to go now to Susan Glasser. She's a staff writer at The New Yorker. But Susan, you have a lot of foreign policy experience and knowledge. We just heard Monica talking about the fact that the president has spoken with Bibi Netanyahu. We also saw a statement that he has spoken to the Saudi crown prince. How does the U.S. being involved in defending Israel from this attack from Iran, was that predictable? And does it change at all the calculation inside the White House with where the U.S. goes from here?
Yeah, I think it's notable, but it would be a surprise if the United States wasn't participating in the defense of Israel, because that really would be the policy and has been the policy of Democrats and Republicans alike in recent decades. And so I think the surprise would have been, if the U.S. wasn't deploying assets and making them available to the Israelis as they defend itself. It would be notable, and I think was striking, that the U.S. decided not to participate in a proactive way in this preemptive Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear capability. And I think there's also a level, a sort of an uncertainty. Here we are, we're going to be approaching soon the 24-hour mark since Israel made this very, I think, bold and audacious attack on Iran. And yet it's not entirely clear where President Trump and his administration stand, in part because they've been having a real fight inside the sort of MAGA inner circle. The foreign policy world around Trump has been divided on the question. There are some more traditional Republican hawks very suspicious of Iran, very suspicious of the nuclear talks that Trump personally very much wanted to engage in. And yet there are also many of the kind of Tucker Carlson types inside the administration and on the outside who are very wary and worried that Israel will get the United States into another war in the Middle East. And I thought it was very interesting that Carlson publicly kind of broke with the hawks in the Trump world today. And I think you're going to see that fight continue. And that's partially why we're a little bit confused and don't know exactly what the American policy is right now.
Yeah, Susan, those of us who have been covering foreign policy here for a long time have seen successive administrations say they want to pivot U.S. foreign policy away from the Middle East. They want to focus on other places in the world. Obama, Trump, they all just keep getting pulled back into this debate because of actions and things that happen on the ground. Corey, before I let you go, I do want to ask you, since you were the former deputy administrator for the Defense of Nuclear Nonproliferation and you are so intimately aware and familiar with these facilities in Iran, we have this statement from the head of the IAEA who told the UN Security Council just a little while ago that the above-ground plant where Iran was producing uranium enriched up to 60% has been destroyed. Do you know what he's talking about, and what can you tell us about that facility? Corey, do we still have you with us?
I'm here.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Natanz is one of the two major uranium enrichment facilities in Iran, and it is a combination of underground and above ground facilities. Some of the key facilities are or were actually above ground. And that includes some of their research and development, some of their manufacturing and their testing facilities, and a place where they could have small cascades of centrifuges to produce higher levels of enrichment. This is in addition to the major fortified underground facility at Fordo. What I really worry about is I hope that this does push Iran back to the negotiating table, but I'm afraid the lesson that they'll take away is that none of their bluster and none of their rhetoric was able to deter Israel from this action, and maybe their only deterrence would be nuclear weapons. I really worry that these actions are driving Iran closer to making that decision to pursue nuclear weapons and rather than further away.